Okay, everyone. So we've gone ahead and we've created, sample examples of these various programming parts of speech, as I like to call them, right? These are all of the different types of things that we can have. And in fact, so we have one kind of commenting. It turns out there's two ways for us to comment in JavaScript. Now, for the most part, we want to use this nice version that Aptiana is going to go ahead and create with us. This is a nice way to let us be a little bit more expressive, right? Because we can write across multiple lines. Sometimes we want to label something really directly. Actually, this is going to come up for us again in our visualization practice, right? Like, in other words, this is kind of a key, right? Or a header or a deck, we sometimes call it, right? So very often in a graphic, you have the headline, right? Which is, you noted from this week's assignment, always want to have a verb in there. If you don't have a verb in your headline, you're in trouble. And then we have a deck, right? We have a couple of lines of explanation that sort of say, here's the things to look for in this. And then we have a question about how we want to label things, right? So sometimes we have a key, right? We have a separate visual area where we sort of say, here are the three colors that are present, and we give a little description of what they are. Sometimes we want to label things directly. So in JavaScript, when we're commenting, there are times when we want to sort of label things a bit more directly, right on the line, and we don't want to add a lot of kind of bulk. And so there's a way we can do that, which is to just put 2 forward slashes. Now we can only do this if we're commenting on the same line, on a single line. But we can do it like this. We can do it after the entry. We can do it after some active code. And the comments will be ignored, right? That's why we call them comments. The computer is not going to try to interpret them at all. It's literally, those are just for the humans who are reading the code. So okay, so you can see I can label these things. Example of a Boolean, right? And again, if we've done a good job in sort of labeling our data containers here and naming our variables, then it should be a little bit clear already what is going on. So I'm being a little bit redundant in my labeling right now. And we will ask you to be a little bit redundant in the beginning. Towards the end of the semester, as you guys are more practiced with this stuff, you'll be a little bit more concise and particular about what you label and where and how. But for now, we're going to err on the side of being exhaustive in our commenting and labeling. So this is a list of numbers, and this is an object. Okay. So even though these don't necessarily produce anything by, let's say, here's a string. Okay, so as we noted earlier, when I load my page up here, okay, there's nothing visible, right, on the sort of what I'm going to call the front of the page, which is what happens when we load it through the browser. There's nothing obviously going on. Now, it would be very frustrating if we couldn't see anything of what was happening sort of on the underside of the web page with like the data and things like that, except through visual mechanisms, right? Because it's sort of like, actually, I happen to know this, that it used to be really old typewriters. You actually couldn't see what you were typing. Really, really old typewriters, you couldn't see what you were typing. You just had to type, and then when you pulled the paper out, you saw what was there. And you can imagine that is a very frustrating and error-prone way to write, as it would be here. So we have a way of kind of peeking behind the scenes even when we have the page loaded. And when we load the page is when the code actually does something, right? So I mean, here we have kind of one view of the same page, right? But we're viewing it essentially as a writer, as a creator, and then we have this browser view, which is actually doing the translation. So this is the sort of machine. This is the version that we write for the machine, and then this is what happens after the machine has interpreted it, right? And has said, oh, okay, I understand, I'm going to go through and I'm going to understand these meanings, and then I'm going to interpret them and output something based on my understanding of it, right? You can think of it as a kind of translation, right? So this is the language that we feed to the computer. When we load up our web page, it does a translation, and this is the result. So in order to view our data containers, we have a special function. Okay, we have a special mechanism. Again, one of these things that the computer already knows how to do, a task it already knows how to do. It's an area called the console. And the console, we'll look at in just a minute. Okay, hold on a second. Pardon me, a couple of very loud sneezes in there. Okay, so the console is an area, it's that sort of underside or the flip side of our web browser paper, if you will. And when we put this, when we give it this command, console log, okay, when we have these kinds of commands, these functions, the way it knows what it should be looking for, right, is by what you put inside the round parentheses. So round parens means a function, okay? So again, I'm highlighting these bits of punctuation because it's really going to help you as you start to, read through other people's programs. Again, just the same way that when you're reading a story, right, we look for things like double quotes, which indicate that someone is being quoted. We look for paragraphs, that tells us a new idea is starting. We have all of these things that we're used to in English, and what we're learning to do here is just how to recognize those same types of elements in code. Okay, so what this is going to do is it's going to tell the web page, look, I want you to sort of show this in this special area so that I can see what's going on. So the way that we get to that special area is you're going to right click. So I have my regular page here. I'm going to reload it. Okay. Now I'm going to right click and choose Inspect Element. And what this is going to bring up, first of all, is it's actually going to show me the web page. The structure of the web page. So you see there's our head tag and our body tag. Those little dot dot dots are exactly like they are ellipses, right? They're saying, look, there's more stuff in here, but I'm not showing it to you right now. What we want right now over here is this console tab. And what do you know? I said console log and I passed it. I said in here, I want you to log this thing. Okay. And now what is it doing here? Because what it showed me actually in that place was it showed me this. It showed me here's my string. It showed me the green part, the string part. So this is a good example of, again, this interpretation that the computer does for us, because when it sees sample string, okay, see how sample string is white here? Well, it says, okay, you've passed me something white. You've passed me the label of a box, of a data box. So I'm going to go look for that data box, and I'm going to show you what's inside it. Okay, so that process, okay, is very crucial, right? When we first create something, we say variable sample number. Okay, we're creating the box. Later on, if we use that same name, if we say, look, here's the label of the thing that I'm talking about, we can both make it show us what's in that container, show us what's in that box, and we can even change the value of what's in that box. So, for example, if I said sample string equals, now it's another string, okay, and then said console log sample string, with any luck, what I'm going to get is two messages. The first of which is going to have this value, and the second of which is going to have this value. Let's see what happens. I don't have to open this every time, by the way. If you leave the console open, it will just stay open and you can reload the page and see what happens. And there you go. Now, why didn't it just, go through and say, well, wait a second, sample string is now this? Because computer programs read in the same way that we do in English, from top to bottom, left to right. Okay, so at this point in the program, right, it's the same way that in a story, you start out with some introductory information about somebody. I always want to get away from Mr. Smith because I don't even know why I go there, but okay, John Doe, not any better. You introduce somebody. You say so. Mr. Smith is a plumber, right? And you have this, so you have this introduction, right, where you do this, and then later you might say, now, however, Mr. Smith is a lawyer. right? And so over time, we can change the value, the understanding of who that person is and what they do by adding information or updating information. And that's exactly what we're doing in this case. So what I want to introduce to you all another few elements about how these things work and how we can access different parts of them. So more, strings, numbers, booleans are pretty straightforward, right? They have a single value. It's a string. It's a number. Arrays and objects have a little bit more to them. So one thing that I want to show you is, again, if you look at sample array up here, we see it's 23, 1, 2, 7, 4, 7, 54. Now, one thing I want you to notice is that this list, this array is a list, right? They're basically interchangeable. They're the same thing. And it is constructed much like a list is in the English language, right? We have commas between all the elements except for the last one, right? When we're writing out a list of things, we don't put a comma and then a period, we just put a period. So in this case, there's no comma after the last element. But if I want to access, let's say I want to know the value of just the third item in this list, okay? There are two things that we need to deal with here. So one way that I could do this is I could just say, look, console log, and I'm going to say sample array, and what I can do is I can just pass it the number of the item that I want to see, right? So I'm saying, look, in sample array, just give me, in brackets, I give it the number of the item you want. Give me number 3. So I'm going to do this. And it gives me number 7. And wait a second. 7 is the 4th item. What's going on? Okay, those of you who come from or have been to other countries, notably in Europe, for example, you'll notice that they actually start numbering floors with the ground floor is always ground, and then the quote-unquote first floor is one flight up. Computers do exactly the same thing. We call this zero indexing, which means that if we want to access the third item, we actually pass it the number 2 because 23 is the 0th, and then the first and the second. The 0th. In the first item has an index of 0, and then the second one has an index of 1, and the third one has an index of 2. It's a little bit to get used to, but keep that ground floor analogy in your head, and it works pretty well. The other thing that I want to look at now too is how do I get to parts of an object. So if I just want to say, look, show me the whole object with this console log sample object thing, okay, I load it up, and it'll show me all of the bits of that. But let's say that I actually just want to know what sample object's property value is, right? I don't want this whole thing, I just want this bit, right? This value bit. Well, the way that I do that is with a dot, okay? So I can say sample object dot sample property. Okay, so again, it's going to look at this and it's going to say, okay, where's sample object? Okay, there's sample object. Then it's going to say, well, in sample object, is there something called sample property? Oh, yes, there is. So I'm going to return you the stuff that's in that. And there we go. Okay, one last bit. We're going to add a little bit more to this in class, but this is just to sort of get you guys going with the basic structure here. One last bit that I want to point out is what happens if I log sample variable. Okay, now remember, I've created the box called sample variable, but it's empty. So what is it going to show me if I say what's in the box? What's in the box? It's going to return this value undefined. And undefined is exactly that. It's basically saying, look, I don't know what you're talking about. You're asking me for the contents of something that is empty, right? And there isn't a notion of empty, but there is this notion of undefined. So just to get us back on track here, we have this idea of something being undefined. And again, that's just going to be a hint to you if you ever see that, well, you haven't actually given value to this thing yet. So in class, we're going to look at a couple more extensions of this, but this is just to get you guys familiar with some of the structures and patterns that we're going to be working with. I know it seems like a lot right now, it is, but again, with a little bit of practice, you're going to start to get really comfortable with this stuff. So that's it for this week, and I will see you all on Tuesday.